Welcome to Trial Think, the podcast of Kenney Sams. In each episode, our team of nationally recognized litigators and industry experts discuss how the lessons they learned before, during, and after trial can be used to reverse engineer best practices for attorneys, clients, and risk managers.
This is Nate Cole, the host of Kenney Sams podcast, Trial Think. This is the third installment of our Trial Think podcast. And joining me today are three associates with the firm, Herling Romero, Mike Dickman, and Brittany Darcy. Thanks to the three of you for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Nate.
Nice to be here.
All right. We're gonna have fun today. You're associates. I'm one of the shareholders of the firm. Feel free to speak freely, and I want to ask you questions about what your experience has been like, not just at the firm, but generally the practice of law and how it is to be an associate. So the point of this podcast is to get that perspective. Now, it's a perspective that I think is informed necessarily by the way that we do things at Kenney Sams, but the three of you have your own paths that brought you to this point. You're all very engaged, well-respected lawyers within the firm, and you've got your own perspective of what it takes to be effective and come from different backgrounds. And all of those things inform, I think, what makes you excellent advocates, excellent teammates, and really good lawyers with bright futures. So, without further ado, let me start with Brittany. Brittany, thanks for joining us, and can you tell our listeners a bit about yourself and how you got to the point where you're an associate at Kenney Sams?
Sure. I started as an associate at a Connecticut firm, loved it there, really felt like it was a great place to work, but life brought me to Massachusetts. I started my Massachusetts career at a Boston firm. Again, great place to work. But what I found over the course of my career is that I wanted to pivot. And so I was previously a family law attorney and decided to pivot towards a more litigation focused, away from the probate side of things. And so I found myself at Kenney Sams, and one of the things that really stuck out about this firm, and one of the things that I think is so important as an associate, is finding a place that when you go in for the interview, the personalities click, the culture seems like something that you will fit right in with. And I think that that's really unique. It's hard to find, and you need to find what fits for you, and that's what Kenney Sams has been for me.
Well, the truth, Brittany, is that we did click during the interview. We were very interested and thought you'd be a great fit. But you didn't initially say yes. You turned us down. It took a little bit of courting. So what took place in your life between when we initially connected and when you ultimately decided to join the firm that made you realize that it was a good fit for you? We knew you were going to be a good fit for the firm, and it's turned out to be the case.
Well, some of what happened was really just life. The housing market was very tough. My husband and I were moving from the city to the suburbs. And one of the things that I think is important, and it's just a reality of firm life, is you need to know that your life works with the firm. And I'm someone who likes to be in the office. I am someone who is in the office most days. I know I'm working from home right now. And so I wanted to be somewhere that I could go into the office with a short commute. And that meant finding a place that we could live that was close to the office. And so once that happened, and once I felt like the pieces were falling into place, I was very eager to come back and say, will you have me now that I'm finally putting these pieces in place?
Great. Well, we're lucky that you joined the firm, and thanks for being here. Mike Dickman, can you please tell us a bit about your background and how it is that you ended up at Kenney Sams?
Absolutely. So I graduated law school from Northeastern University School of Law, just like Herling, in 2018. So that makes me a sixth-year associate, I believe. Kenney Sams is my third law firm outside of law school. My first one was doing asbestos toxic tort work, gained some good discovery deposition experience, didn't really feel like doing asbestos defense work for a while. Moved to another regional defense firm doing general liability defense work, and really enjoyed that, continued to gain more experience. But when the opportunity came around to join Kenney Sams 2.5 years ago, I was at a point in my career where I wanted to expand and get outside my comfort zone a little bit more and become working at a more dynamic, hard-charging environment, and that has certainly been the case at Kenney Sams. And I was immediately introduced to the hard-charging environment of Kenney Sams during my interview when Mike Sams playfully, maybe not playfully from my perspective, during the interview, castigated me for wearing a slightly casual tennis-like shoe during my interview. But I think I've been a trendsetter, fashion, and appreciate working at the firm, learning and growing with the others at the firm. And it's been a quick but enjoyable 2.5 years.
Well, notwithstanding your footwear, Mike, I remember your interview. It was a strong interview, and you've been a great addition to the firm. And it also shows that even firms that have been around for 17 years and that have a certain approach towards the practice of law are evolving and changing. And we certainly have. And it's been great to get a whole new group of perspectives and folks to join. And a big part of running a successful law firm is making sure that you're meeting people where you find them. And it's something that I've learned from the three of you, certainly, and it's made the firm a better place. Herling, good to see you. And what is your story? How did you end up here? And how did you find your way to Kenney and Sams and decide to become a litigator?
Sure, yeah. So, like Mike said, I went to Northeastern University School of Law, graduated in 2018 as well. Out of law school, I worked at a small boutique firm, primarily doing patent and employment litigation. Got some great experience there, including second chairing a trial in which we won on a novel issue on a patent litigation case. But I did feel like I needed a bit more guidance in terms of how to handle the litigation from start to finish. And really, I wanted to be an independent attorney and less dependent on the partners running the case. With that in mind, I was kind of looking for a place that provided that kind of guidance and also had a strong support for their associates' fashion sense. So when
We
I
still
came,
hired you.
exactly, yeah. When I came over for the interview, I got to talk to you. I got to talk to Mike, Chris, Dave Kerrigan. So, I mean, talk about heavy hitters in terms of litigation, and that really came across. I had just come off arguing my first summary judgment motion in front of Judge Saris, and here in the U.S. District Court of Massachusetts, and that seemed to resonate with the group of shareholders and partners, and I really felt like it was a place where I could grow those skills that I had started to develop in a way that would make me a better attorney. So that's really it. It's a pretty simple kind of desire to be better. And I think that's kind of what unites us and a central part of the culture at Kenney and Sams, that, you know, everyone's, even from Mike Sams, Chris Kenney, you Nate, down to humble associates like me, everyone wants to be better every day. So I think that's kind of been what brought me here and what's kept me here.
Yeah, that's a great point. And thanks for sharing that story with us and for the others to share theirs. But that sort of the things we can't agree on, I think, is so much more important for the culture of a firm than the things you may disagree on, the approaches that may be a little bit different from lawyer to lawyer. But when you have these fundamentals, and we'll talk about some of those core values, the things that keep us on the same page and rowing in the same direction, are very important. One of the things I've seen I have a lot of interest in making sure that understanding associates, that it's such a big part of the ability to grow your book of business, to be able to maintain strong relationships and provide excellent service to clients. The partners do a lot, and most clients, I think, appreciate the way that work is delegated and the team that we put on our case. But Kenney Sams in particular really is a team environment. And I say that to mean you've got a partner that has the high level strategic ability and experience, and then we delegate and we are able to really bring the depth of the firm. We're up to 23 lawyers or so, bringing that team approach and the depth to be able to best service clients. It really does require all of us to feel comfortable with one another, to trust one another, but be going in that same direction towards excellent delivery of the work product and of communication to the clients. It's something I know that the four of us are all on the same page, but it is a hard job. And being an associate at a firm, I think, is an especially hard job. I've read somewhere that it's one of those jobs with the lowest satisfaction of any position. And you've gone through years of undergrad, 4 years of college, then you got to go to law school for 3 years. And then finally, after all these years of education, you think you're ready to go, and you just run right into what it's like working at a firm and how intense that can be, the pressure, the expectations, and most of us are type A personalities. We're being as hard on ourselves really as anyone else, and it's something that we've all talked about. But in light of all these things, I want to ask you this question that I know I've posed to you, and I ask associates when they come aboard all the time. What is your why? Why are you doing this? Because I think it's a really important question that all of us as professionals need to be asking ourselves throughout the course of our careers. That why may change, but it's an important thing to be checking in, because I think as lawyers, I know for me, it was more about just taking one step at a time and sort of marching forward. And we saw this path, and we may be people that can understand a task and achieve it and execute on it. But all of a sudden you wake up and you're now at this destination that you never really thought about what it would be like when you arrived. And so I ask people when they come aboard, and I ask people throughout the time that they're here, and I ask myself all the time, why am I doing this? And it's not just a rhetorical question. I am curious, Mike, what made you decide that you wanted to be not just a lawyer, but particularly a litigator? Because there's all different types of ways to practice law, but to be a litigator at a place that is, a boutique sort of, hard, I think hard charging is the expression you use. We are hard charging. We have high expectations of ourselves and one another. What's your why?
Yeah, that's a good question. One that I've asked myself when I came over here, when I interviewed here back in October of 2021, that was, and sometimes ask it periodically when I get a nasty gram from opposing counsel or some terse response from a client. But I think it boils down, at least from my perspective, to a constant pursuit of self-improvement and challenging myself on a daily basis. Civil litigation is a very hard business that we've chosen, but as with things generally in life, that those challenging things, while in the short term they are difficult and they present a lot of obstacles, if you deal with them, you encounter them, and you grow through them, that's really a very satisfying experience. And so not only is civil litigation hard, Kenney Sams is a dynamic, hard-charging firm, which makes it its own set of challenges. But I think that I was interested. I was at a point in my career as a third, fourth year associate where I could have been very comfortable doing insurance defense, and not to speak poorly of insurance defense, but I could see myself getting lulled into a sense of security, into a comfort zone there. Whereas at Kenney Sams, it's a firm where your boundaries, your comfort zone is always pushed, and I think that that's a great way for self-improvement, for growth, and civil litigation happens to be kind of the vehicle by which that growth occurs. And as difficult as it can sometimes be, it's also fun and stimulating to have that constant and daily challenge through the work that we do.
All right, so Mike, you like to be challenged. That's a good why. Brittany, what's your why? You've been at intense and well-respected bigger firms, and you spoke a little bit about wanting to pivot away from family law. What's your why? And as you sit here now in 2024, I don't know if that why is changing at all for you as life changes, but where are you at, and why are you doing this?
So you bring up an interesting point. I'm sitting at home right now, and I'm at a point in my life where my husband and I just welcomed our second baby, and so we have 2 kids. And when you have
congrats.
every time that you have a kid, I think you sort of take a step back and you evaluate, where am I at? And Nate and Mike, you guys are really selling this profession, talking about low job satisfaction and hard charging, intense environments. But I think the fact of the matter is, there are just certain people who, at a certain point, you recognize what career paths are a good fit for you. And I think with litigation, and especially working at a firm like Kenney Sams, and I keep coming back to the culture, but I think the culture, finding a place that fits for you is so important. And finding a place where you can build your career. And I think at Kenney Sams, for me, and this is something I've thought about from the start of my career, how can you mesh your skill set with the job you are doing? And for me, relationship building is huge. I like spending time with people. I like sort of butting heads with adversaries, only at the end of the day to find that I really respect the people who are on the other side of the case. The work is interesting, but also there's there's always this question of what's next, right? When you're a lawyer, your career is never really going to be the same thing day in and day out. And at a firm like Kenney Sams, and I think at a lot of these mid-sized firms that present so many opportunities for associates that you don't necessarily get if you're at a huge firm or if you're at a two-person firm, one of the great benefits is this question of, where can I bring my career? What's the next step? How can I build my book of business? And finding a place that really allows you to craft that and build upon it has been, for me, it's been the last couple of years have just been really incredible, because you always feel like there's this next step and what's the potential that I can reach. And when you're an associate, feeling like you're not just focused on the billing hours, but also focused on building your career, I think it gives you a little bit of, something to work for beyond just how many hours am I able to bill this week.
But I want to follow up on that, because I appreciate hearing good things about the firm. We got that award last year of best law firms to work at, one of the, I think, 3 or 4 in Massachusetts. I think there are fewer than 30 nationally. And it really speaks to the effort that the firm has made, and I think the quality of the people that we have. For me, the why is I really like the people that I work with, and I like the clients that I get to work with. The pressure, I do, to Mike's point, enjoy being put in a position to be challenged and see how I respond to that. But I adore the people that we work with, the quality individuals on the legal end of it. I think it's great lawyering up and down the hallways, but I just really enjoy the people. I think it's high quality, high integrity, very ethical, nevertheless persistent and professional and hard charging, but people that take the ethics and the profession seriously. But what specifically, Brittany, if you can give examples of what has made Kenney Sams a good fit for you at this stage of your career?
So for me, like I said, I like relationship building. I like getting out and meeting with people. And I think that, I view that as a way to build my reputation and hopefully build a book of business. And what I found with Kenney Sams was, as soon as I walked in the door, Mike and Chris and you, Nate, were having conversations with me about what organizations can we get you involved in, what leadership roles can we help you take on, who can we introduce you to so that you can really start to build your career. We view you as an associate. We appreciate the work that you do, but we want to see you thrive here because we want to see you here in 10 years. And I think that investment and knowing that and recognizing that you have that investment from the firm where you work as an associate, for me, it felt very important because, look, associates are dime a dozen. You guys could hire lots of different people. You could replace me tomorrow. And so feeling like the firm has a personal investment in you and wants to see you succeed and is willing to put in effort and time to help you get there, that's very valuable. And I think it meant a lot to me from the start.
Well, let me just disagree with one of the things you said, which is you're replaceable or associates are a dime a dozen. I think mediocre associates might be, but I think it's great that firms, because of a younger generation of lawyers coming through and demanding things for themselves and the way they're treated and the experiences that they're having, I think it's been great for firms to have to realize that this is a two-way street. You have options as an associate, and there isn't this mentality of just blind loyalty to a place. We have to back it up, right? And we look at it as, we talk about it all the time, we give all this feedback to associates, and it's got to be the other way as well, that you have to be willing to receive the feedback and be coachable. Coachable is a word that we use all the time with one another, with associates, but with ourselves. That is, I want to be able to hear the feedback, and some of it I'm going to disagree with, but it's so critical to be receptive to it and meet people where you find them, right, and be a good fit for them as much as you want them to be a good fit for you. Herling, what along those lines? What's your why? And I'm glad that it's at Kenney Sams right now, but nothing is forever. And I've said to you a million times that I want to work with you for a long, long time, but we want to make sure that we're a good place for you. So what is your why about how you got here and decided to be a litigator? And why is this firm in particular something that is benefiting you such that you're still here? And notwithstanding my statement earlier that it's low job satisfaction, I think the 4 of us are actually 4 lawyers that like our jobs and that enjoy the opportunities we get and the challenges and how we handle that. So, Herling, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is just inherently the mindset that you carry. And for me, it's, at the risk of outing myself as a nerd, I was a big gamer growing up.
Did you say nerd?
Yeah.
Oh no, I didn't know that
Uh,
about you, Herling. I
yeah,
take it
yeah.
back.
So, the public might not know, but I also was a big sports guy, so I played a ton of sports growing up, and I think inherently in all that stuff is this element of competition, this element of iteration, of developing yourself, about achieving goals, about leveling up, all those kinds of things that I grew up doing in the ton of free time that you have as a child, I think influenced why litigation in particular resonates with me. And I think part of it is, as Brittany said, it's never the same thing every day. You have cases that go through the same procedural steps, but the facts, the contracts, the issues, the parties, the attorneys that are involved are all different. And even if some of the parties are the same, each case is going to look different on a day-to-day basis. And so I think that keeps me interested. Um, I just hate doing rote tasks. I hate busy work, and litigation is anything but that. So I think that's part of the litigation aspect that keeps me interested. In terms of Kenney and Sams and their approach to litigation, I think the key aspect of it is giving me this autonomy, independence, and the tools to be better. Again, I love being independent. I love taking charge. And you guys give us the agency to do it and then provide a safety net in case, I run into circumstances where I haven't encountered a situation before. I need a sounding board. I need some advice. And you guys have been there and done that, I don't know how many times before. So that's really kind of the why for me. I love the challenge of it. I think once I start getting comfortable with something, it's when my mind starts racing and saying, am I really making the best of my time? Um, embracing the challenge, embracing the discomfort of litigation that's inherent in it. And yeah,
And that variety that you speak to of having something different all the time. For some people, they may not like that. They may like
Yeah.
rote. You've got to like a lot of different things coming at you all
Yeah.
the time. Eventually, you start to you may not recognize the cases to be similar, but there are constants across the way that we approach cases, the way that you lean into the protocols that we can talk to in a bit to be successful at any firm. But certainly, we have protocols that we want people to follow, not because we're looking for people to fall in line, although that's a part of it. It's good to be part of a team that is going about things the same way. But I've said to the three of you, and I repeat this, it's really about following these protocols as a way to just get some security in a world that is really uncertain. And if you follow these things that have been tested and that work, it helps take a big, scary case with all sorts of moving parts and start to distill it down. Herling, you talked about gaming as something that you're interested in. You and I have, confession to our listeners, I'm a bit of a gaming nerd myself, or at least I was in a time in life when I had more time on my hands. We look for certain attributes when we're trying to hire people, and associates in particular. There's a big push at times for people that have maybe participated in sports in college because of the idea of that shows teamwork or a drive to be competitive. I've sort of said, well, it's not exactly that. I want somebody that's really passionate about something. When I'm looking for a candidate, I want to know that they just have something that they're really into, because I need that high degree of passion and commitment to whatever it may be. It doesn't necessarily have to be sports, but I want to see someone has interest outside of work and that they've pursued. And I also like, someone like Herling. We'll talk about gaming, the strategy part of it, because so much of what we do is strategy and thinking ahead and seeing around corners. What would the three of you say is sort of what's the key attribute? Is it you've got a competitive spirit? You got to want to win? Is it that you just really love challenges and like to be pushed? Is it like the strategy? What is the through line for all of those things that you've spoken to? Mike, what are your thoughts?
That's a good question. I mean, speaking to the protocols, as that being kind of the security blanket or, base standard operating procedure at the firm. When I think of the attorneys here, it's not like the Chris, Mike, and Nate, the folks that run the firm, the directors, the partners. It's not like they look for a cookie cutter personality, background, working style. Prior life experience, and so I think there is no, set list of criteria or attributes that you have to, find in a person's personal background. But I think, being organized, being reliable, being trustworthy, following up on things, I think especially from an associate's perspective and from an associate at Kenney and Sams, those are things that are going to make you a better lawyer, but also secure the trust of the clients, the firm's clients, and the associates' clients as the partners, the directors, and shareholders. It's our job to keep them happy and to keep them off our backs so we're not getting pestered with follow-up emails early morning, late at night. And by doing that work up front, by demonstrating, yeah, like, don't worry, while you're away or occupied with another task, I'll handle this case for you, by demonstrating that you can take the initiative and handle a case on your own, that there is a snowball effect, that there's going to be less concern about, oh, is Mike, Brittany, or Herling, actually moving on this case based on their track record. Um, there's a reliability and a credibility there. And so all that to say, I think, organization and initiative are factors that always occur to me, and attributes that I try to continue to hone personally.
When I spoke with Michelle De Oliveira and Greg Vandeneyck on the last podcast, I talked about something that I know I've mentioned to all of you, is when a client is reaching out for an update, it's almost by definition too late. It doesn't mean that you can't get back to them, and of course you should, but it's that moment that should give you a little bit of a cringe when you realize, I don't want the client to have to be wondering, because if they're wondering what's going on, they're worrying, and if they're worrying, I'm not taking that off their plate, which is a big part of my job. It's not just to do a great job lawyering, it's the hand-holding, and I don't mean that in a pejorative way. You all know how the firm puts such an emphasis on clients and not just winning for them. It's almost table stakes for us, right? We want to be doing a great job for the client in the courtroom and with opposing counsel. But how we message that and how frequently and the way we're respectfully, collaboratively informing the client is a really big part of how you build what Mike's speaking to in terms of this trust. And I want to hear from the three of you. Herling spoke about autonomy, and you're all mature, beyond your years lawyers and adults that we trust. I work with the three of you quite a bit, and I have no problem with you reaching out to clients directly, because I know you're going to know how to speak to the client, you know how to get the information, and if you don't know the answer, you'll know it's your job to find it and get back to the client promptly. So you're very, maturity is sort of the word I would look for to bring a lot of this together. But I do think that a lot of firms struggle with this idea of a generational shift towards lawyers that maybe want less autonomy and maybe more hand-holding. How do you reconcile that with the experience you've had and what you like about practicing here, where you do get autonomy? Herling tried his first case before a jury last year, a district court case for a client of mine, and did a great job, got a defense verdict. And that was a scary moment. I remember asking Herling, do you want to try this case? And he sort of said, yeah, and then said it more forcefully. But how do we reconcile this sort of generational shift of wanting more hand-holding with the idea of needing the autonomy to grow and become your version of what a successful lawyer is going to be? Brittany, what are your thoughts on that, and how does that work for you?
Well, I'm gonna push back on something that you said, which is that that this generation needs more handholding. I don't know that it's a generational shift of needing more handholding. I think it's a generational shift of voicing our discomfort and feeling more comfortable saying to our superiors, "Wait a minute, you're throwing me in the deep end, and I'm not comfortable here." I think a generation ago, people took pride, or take pride now, in saying, I figured it out, and it was tough, and I didn't have someone holding my hand, so you'll figure it out too. Yeah. That might be the case, but I think that our generation is just more comfortable basically saying, this job is a huge part of my life. I am here, and I spend more time with you in this office and these people than I do pretty much anywhere else. And so I'd like to be comfortable here. I'd like to feel good about what I'm doing. And if I feel like I'm drowning, then I'm going to look for some direction. And I think that when you find a firm that fits, one of the key things in terms of succeeding as an associate that I found at any firm I've been at is you need to find your mentor. you need to find your champion. You need to find a senior associate if you're a new associate. You need to find a junior partner whose office you can go and sit in and say, I do not know what is going on. I need you to point me in the direction. I'm not asking you to spoon feed it to me, but you need to point me in the direction of where I can look to figure this out. And I think there's a difference between expecting someone to feed you the answer or tell you exactly how to do something and going to someone you trust and saying, I'm just a little lost. Have you been here before, and can you tell me what direction I can find?
No, that's a fair point. And look, especially if you're at a firm. You're at a firm in part because you want the ability to learn from all these other people. And I want to push back on your pushback to say I don't subscribe to this idea that I forget which generation you are. You don't have to tell me Gen Z, I'm Gen X, and we just like marched forward and didn't bother to ask questions. And I've shared with you all, I'm sort of impressed that associates who are, especially at a litigation firm, I'm hiring you for your judgment. I want your advocacy. That is the job. I'm not offended or in any way sort of resentful of good advocates that know how to advocate for themselves. I focus on, I want to make sure that you're advocating effectively, and lobbing bombs and being negative isn't effective advocacy. That's not how you get people to change. And so we talk a lot about that. But I do want to, I like the pushback. I love working with the three of you, and we've all had experiences on the cases that we worked on together where I have been wrong or where the client has been wrong. And I think it's critical that you develop a rapport with your team, that the junior lawyer, whether they are a day out of law school or 7 years in, is able to say, I'm not understanding this and I need to push back, because ultimately that's what's in the best interest of the client. So I hear what you're saying, Brittany, and I agree with all of it, but I still want to get to this idea that there is a sense of needing more hand-holding. Is it that it's just, that's not really the message that employers and firms should be receiving? Or is there some truth to it at all in terms of your colleagues? Or do you think it's a matter of give them the right training, but also give them autonomy to spread wings, and those things are not mutually exclusive? Herling, what do you think about that?
Nate, yeah, I want to jump in here because I think that,
Jump in.
I kind of agree with Brittany's point, but I think in terms of the hand-holding and the commentary on autonomy, obviously those terms are going to mean different things to different people. And
Okay.
I think autonomy doesn't necessarily mean, you're going to try your first case in your 5th year of being an attorney. It might be that the partner gives you X, Y, and Z parameters. Now run with it within those parameters. And I think that might be where the disconnect is between the generations of, is requesting those parameters under which you're operating autonomously, is that really requesting hand-holding, or is it just, give me this limited guidance that I'm requesting from you, and I'm happy to run with it within those bounds. I just need to know which part of this field is out of bounds, which part of it is in bounds. Be transparent with me on what you really want from me and what you need from me, and I'll be happy and run with it. Because I think part of the discomfort too as an associate, and it's something that even I feel from time to time, is you don't want to step on a shareholder or a partner's toes, or really anyone's toes. So if there's some question as to, am I being charged and emboldened to take charge and go on my own here and push this forward in the way I see fit? Does the partner want to make that determination? Is there a conversation that needs to happen? Obviously, that's a part of judgment, but I think also it's not a lot to ask of the partners and the shareholders that are running the cases to say, this is how I envision this case being handled. I'm going to be pretty much in the background. Keep me in the loop because I want to know what's going on, but you take it and run with it. I trust you with it. Or I think this one's going to be a little more challenging. When we're making substantive decisions on X, Y, and Z motion, run it by me. I just want to make sure I have some eyes on it because it's more meaty, and I think I can provide the associate with a bit more guidance.
Fair enough. Better communication is certainly something that we can all benefit from.
And I think that's still operating autonomously in a sense. It's you're widening or narrowing the box in which the associate's operating. And
Right,
that's going to
Bob.
look different from person to person, partner to partner, case to case. It's just making sure that that's clear from the outset so there's no inefficiencies in determining who's doing what and when.
Mike, do you agree with your Northeastern Law School classmate?
Yeah, for the most part, and with Brittany. Nate, was it you who said hand holding? Are you gonna call us snowflakes too?
No, no.
Also,
First of all, I'm not saying this is Nate's version of the world.
okay.
I'm saying this is
Many
something
people
that
would say,
you hear.
yeah,
That
yeah,
this is not the royal. It's something that you hear generally, and and you know what? From my perspective, it's lazy because I always say, look, on an individual basis, I know people that are 25 years out of school that can't litigate their way out of a paper bag, and I can speak to the three of you and others at the firm. I know junior lawyers and senior associates and everything in between that I would trust right now to go be able to handle almost anyone that they're up against, certainly with the team around them. So I don't feel that way. And I think, part of it, I think, is I like to see people emerging and figuring out how to advocate. My role as a mentor and as someone trying to run the firm and keep everyone going in the same direction is to hear what you're saying, meet you, and I think arm you with the most effective way to get what you're looking for, which you all care about being great lawyers, but you care about these other things. And I think to the point Brittany made is, suddenly now you're saying it out loud and you're saying, this is what I'm looking for. It is important for me to be a great lawyer.
yeah,
But these things are also important, and they're not mutually exclusive necessarily.
yeah. I think it's always a delicate balance, especially for associates, to strike between being autonomous, taking the initiative, being the hard chargers, and feeling confident about being able to tackle anything on their own, while on the flip side, being comfortable and open to expressing vulnerability or uncertainty, and having a mentor that they can go to and say, I don't have the bandwidth to take this on, or I don't feel comfortable, I don't feel like I have the necessary experience to handle XYZ task. Um, and so I think it is that balance, because taking the initiative, being autonomous, learning by doing is the best way to become a stronger lawyer as an associate. But at the same time, if you're always hard charging, you don't take time to step back, recharge, but also appreciate limitations or where you could learn from others, that's where the notion of burnout, anxiety like that happens. And I think, like what Brittany has said about having a mentor, having someone else, many other people within the office or within your network, to rely on and to lean on in those difficult moments, is very important.
Mike, you've
And
been
Mike,
a leader in the Mass Bar Association and other organizations for a while now. The three of you are really involved in various bar groups. But Mike, I know in particular, have made it part of what you're doing as a leader to focus on lawyer well-being and mental health and burnout. So how do you three balance the pressure that I think, frankly, you put on yourselves as professionals that are motivated to be excellent? There's also the external pressures from the firm and from clients, from family, from life. But nobody's harder on yourselves than I think the three of you are. I think it's part of what makes you excellent. It's what's pushing you. But Mike, how do you balance that pressure of being you with also the very real need and desire to want to have a good life and be able to enjoy yourself, not in 10 and 15 years from now, which I think is a silly thing to wait for, but right now while you're in the throes of being an associate with so much going on?
Yeah, I mean, recognizing that this is the job, this is the life I chose. Tomorrow is the first of the month. Uncle Sam and those student loan repayments are going to come knocking. Um, so this is my occupation, this is my livelihood, but I also enjoy it, and I recognize things have to get done on a daily basis. But that being able to get those things done in the first place, but to get those things done in a effective and really strong manner, whatever the work product or presentation may be, that taking time to recharge, take a step back, doing things in a more mindful manner, being consistent with routines and focusing on physical and mental well-being. If you're burning out too quickly or burning out at all, um, you're not going to be a good lawyer, you're not going to be a good associate if you're not also being cognizant of taking care of yourself first and foremost outside of the office, so that you do what you have to do to take care of yourself. You can come in and you can do what needs to be done, and you can pepper the billing entries with those tight, beautiful .2 and .3 descriptions.
So,
Sorry, it's the last day of the month. The billing entry is on top of my mind.
listen, I'm thrilled to hear that. But you're here now, and I want to hear a perspective I think is really important, which is I want to go into it further. How do you specifically balance it, Mike? I know that mentality is important, but sort of just an acceptance of the fact that I've got a hard job, and rather than I think oftentimes we can all sort of get lost in the negativity and belly aching. That's not productive. So what sort of concrete examples from this group have worked for you in terms of how to actually maintain that balance? And I also want to hear from your perspective, what can firms do better? What can senior lawyers do better to help make sure that you're not burning out? Because that's not great for a firm to have really good folks burn out and either go check out the grass, even though it's just green grass somewhere else, or decide that this isn't for them. It's not for them because they're not getting the support they need, and they end up making decisions that I think maybe the future versions of themselves may look back on and say, you could have got through that and it would have been a very fulfilling career for you. So what are you doing specifically to make it work, and what can firms do better to help support associates? Herling?
Yeah, I think for myself, I've been, and Mike touched on this a little bit as well, I've been very deliberate in how I'm planning, my free time, my weekends. It's almost like I'm blocking off time for myself, and understanding that that's helpful to the firm and helpful to me, to make sure that I'm still fresh and functional. So that's part of the job, and cutting out things that I don't really find fulfilling in my personal life. I think it's been really beneficial in that sense, and being conscious of the decisions that I'm making personally. In terms of, I think, what the firm can do better in ensuring that, I think the number one thing is really staffing cases, and that doesn't necessarily mean who's on the case, but also having a conscious, the active knowledge of how many cases and what cases are being assigned to who. And I don't know that that's necessarily always reflected in the billable hours, because if you're being overwhelmed with a certain case and you're trying to move it forward and you just don't know what, but you have 10 other things that you're also worrying about at the same time, it may be something that's detrimental to that specific associate. So I think
it's a really good point, to have effective, efficient staffing. And when you say that, you mean there's someone directly above you that you have access to, that you can be autonomous, but also then have someone who is responsive to requests that you have.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it, but I think also just the nuts and bolts of the case, the specific case that's being assigned to the specific associate. So it might be a smaller case that doesn't seem like much, but the client might be demanding, and it's a really short, fast, punchy, heavy hitter. And I think that has its own stressors that are different and unique from a 27 banker's box case that takes months of doc review to really build up. And I think understanding how those different cases impact an associate, and how many of which of those cases are being assigned to a specific associate at a given time, I think is important to recognize, because the associate is bearing the brunt of that, of the legwork, at least on the ground level. Obviously the partner and associate and the client are all equally concerned and worried and care about the outcome of the case, but I think when this menu of cases is being handed to an associate, and there's no thought to kind of the stressors that are being imparted on the associate by each of those cases, then I think it's doing a disservice to the associate's mental health, because that's a big part of it. It's not necessarily the hours worked, but it's almost like an unquantifiable aspect of working on a specific case.
Yeah, so having mentoring, having staffing where you could go to somebody senior to you and be able to vet something and just be efficient, because it's bad enough at times when you realize that a large part of what we do is driven by the billable hour. We've got minimums and we've got to hit them, and that's part of business models for law firms. But you want to make sure that when you're here, your time is well spent and is an efficient use of your time. Well, the firm certainly wants that, and every firm should be striving for that. Brittany, what has worked for you in terms of supporting your ability to balance a busy life and an active life outside of the firm, and a very active life both as an associate and as someone that is starting to really successfully develop her book of business, which you've had some nice cases come in over the last few weeks, and we're so happy to see that. And that's the result of hard work. But what sorts of things allow you to balance all of those competing interests and still be happy and doing it at a high level?
Well, I think it's a balance of two things that everyone here has touched on. I think it's a balance of setting boundaries and recognizing what your boundaries are, but also keeping in mind, Nate, to your point when we started all this, of what's your why. Because the fact of the matter is that if you're a litigator, and if you're a litigator who's looking to build your book of business, you're going to be busy, and it's going to be really hard to say, I'm just going to have my personal time during these set hours or these set days, and I'm not going to touch work during that time. I've played that game. I've tried to do it that way, and the fact of the matter is it's almost sometimes more stressful because sometimes the work just builds up, and it is what it is. There are busy seasons, and then there are times when it's not so busy. I know, for example, Mike Dickman will disagree with me on this because he and I have talked about, Mike really is he's got some firm boundaries when it comes to, early morning emails or Sunday night emails, and I respect that. I happen to be someone who gets up pretty early, and I send a lot of emails pretty early in the morning because I have to get them out before my psychotic toddler is pulling at my pant leg at 7:30. And between 7:30 and 9 a.m., it's really hard for me to be on email when a lot of people who have some more normal hours are sort of starting their day. And so I think you just have to recognize, first of all, if you're a lawyer, what your boundaries are, what your comfort level is, and also recognize, and this comes from the top down too, my hours are not your hours. I saw that in an email signature once and I loved it. When I'm sending you an email, that doesn't mean you need to respond in 5 minutes. I'm just sending it out now because this is the time that I have. I think communicating that within a firm is so important. Unless there is an emergency, you do not need to respond to this email right away, even if I'm emailing you at 5:03 a.m. I'm just sending this now because it's my time to get through my inbox, get through what I need to do for the day before the craziness starts. And so some of that is, again, like I said, remembering that, things can be a little crazy for a while, but you're driven because you have goals that you want to achieve, long term.
Well, Mike, I credit for, first of all, it really advocating for this idea of boundaries with opposing counsel and within the firm, and making sure that you are maintaining that autonomy, but also that sort of space for yourself. And little things that I think partners can do and do better. If I'm sending out an email and it's in an off hour, I've worked on putting in the subject line, "This isn't an emergency. You get back to me." I'm sending it because I'm getting it off my desk, but that you don't need to worry about it. And setting those expectations, I think, at a minimum, is helpful for associates who are trying to do a great job. Also, just like using the technology of delay send. And Mike had explained that to me of, put in a delay send. So if I'm firing off a bunch of emails on a Sunday because I'm reviewing bills, I have to remember that nobody likes to get those when you're sitting there on the couch on Sunday relaxing and suddenly, it's pinging and you're looking at it thinking, oh, do I need to respond to this right away or not? And you may not know. So I try to at least set those expectations clearly of, this isn't an emergency. I'd love if I could hear from you on this in the beginning of next week, and even better, from my friend Mike Dickman, hit delay send. It's an easy enough trick that we can do from our phones, we can do it from our desktop, and I appreciate that. So, Brittany, that's just a little bit of feedback for you when I get your emails at 4:30 in the morning. I mean, how about a delay send? I appreciate it.
And that's something that I have come to appreciate probably more so than I did when I was writing that reference piece about different email expectations, that I was probably coming from the perspective of someone who works quote unquote traditional hours, and that while when I'm clearing throughout my inbox on a Saturday or Sunday, I schedule send for Monday morning. Who knows, maybe the recipient of those would prefer to receive those on a Saturday or Sunday afternoon when they may be doing the same, and they can deal with it then, as opposed to receiving a avalanche of emails at 9 a.m. on Monday. So I can see that has potentially the same effect that I'm trying to avoid. I guess the point on emails, that my experience is that has both been a stressor of the constant deluge, early morning through late night, of getting those, but even from 8:30 to 6 when I'm at the office, of hearing those pings in the Outlook and those being a source of distraction, taking me away from that discrete task that I set 10 a.m. to noon aside to finish drafting that brief, and instead I'm playing Outlook whack-a-mole. It's always a constant struggle in balance to strike. I would say on what firms can do, what employers can do. The NORC report on lawyer well-being that came out last year, I think provides the best distillation on the positive impact. The role of a supportive work environment is the term they used in um, promoting well-being within the legal community, and they provide 7 different criteria. I'm not going to go through them now, but I think that's kind of a good guidepost for what firms, K&S, not inclusive or not exclusive of what they can kind of look at and take an introspective look and say, how are we meeting these 7 indicators so that we're not, running our associates, our employees ragged, and we're taking stock of their well-being so that they can be better employers, better employees, and better employees for a longer period.
Those are great tips. I think, from my perspective, what I had growing up as a lawyer and coming along was I had a couple of really important mentors. And so it means a lot to me to be available as a mentor and share what I know, share what has worked. I think we've all experienced that. You learn probably the most amount of things about being a really good lawyer from the near misses, those mistakes that keep you up at night. You will never forget those.
Yeah.
But it's just as important, especially for junior lawyers, that you understand that we've got your back. When mistakes are going to be made, it doesn't mean it's fatal. As long as you're transparent and you own it and you come to us, we can then figure out how to address it. And most of the time, issues in the course of a job that involves a ton of judgment, it's not fatal. We'll be able to fix it with experience. We can work our way around it. So that's a really big lesson, I think, for all junior lawyers that are out there, is find good mentors, people that you can trust and that you're going to be able to have these candid conversations with, so that you're not just constantly walking around, with your head on a swivel. It's a tough job when you're fighting against all of these other opponents that are very effective and that are trying to do the best for their client. It's a battle, and we use these metaphors of the battling or in the trenches. When you're with the firm, you want to be with a place that you know that the people on your side, people in the trenches with you, they genuinely are there to support you. And not because you're perfect, but because you have a high degree of integrity, and when you make mistakes, we work to fix them and we don't make the same mistake twice, and we are always prepared. Things that associates, I think in particular, need to appreciate. You have much more control over a lot of this than you believe, in particular, controlling your preparation and mastering the facts. You may not have the experience or the legal know-how yet to see how everything plays out, but there are so many things that associates can be the masters of, and it's critical for partners that are bouncing around from case to case to have associates that are able to say, this is what this case is about, and now I need to interact with you on what the strategy looks like. Herling,
Yeah.
and prepping for, go ahead, Herling.
Sorry, yeah, just it just can't be overstated the importance it is to have partners that really have your back. I don't remember how many times I've walked into your office and the first words out of my mouth are I messed up. And
It's 17 and a half since last Thursday.
yeah, so it's because I have that trust that you're going to sit down and you're not going to have a conversation as to well, I don't know why we still have you here. It's more a conversation of, okay, let's figure out how to fix this, and then develop some action steps and get this done for the client. And I think that again is this tremendous comfort when you're being granted and given and expected to have this autonomy over cases. Part of the initial worry about having that autonomy is, well, what the hell am I doing here, right? And am I going to screw up? And then, but knowing and having confidence in yourself is one aspect of it, but the other aspect is you have confidence in the people that are supporting you and trust in the people that are supporting you. And I think that just alleviates so much of the stressors in practicing law, being an attorney, and being a growing one in particular.
Yeah, and that takes time to build that trust, both with your colleagues and the senior people, and it takes those moments when something does happen, how people truly respond. And I think if you've been around people that you now trust long enough, we've had those moments where we've seen them when things go bad. That's when you can really see somebody's character and how loyal they are, and are they what they preach to be. And I'm glad to hear that you've had that experience at the firm. I think all of you have. One thing I want to ask you about, and Herling, we had talked about this a little bit in prepping, but as I see we're getting close to the end of the hour, one thing that is, you're going to make mistakes, and we talk about there are mistakes that are sort of we can work with and that are going to happen, and then there are mistakes that are non-starters and that can't happen, right? Missing a deadline or just those sorts of mistakes are really problematic. I don't think that that's what we see a lot of. We don't at Kenney and Sams, and I think hopefully most firms aren't seeing that, right? That can't happen. There are just certain deadlines that have to be met, and there are certain rules that have to be followed. It's the moments where you maybe don't have the full context and the experience, and maybe you made a judgment call, and we really push people to start to practice giving advice and thinking about how would I message this. And it may not be exactly as I would have worded it or said it. Maybe an issue was missed. So in those moments, we can really use them as great learning opportunities. And the three of you, I think, are great about that. You're confident in what you do well. You're going to make some mistakes sometimes, and then you trust us to help guide you through it before the big mistake is made, right? It's part of the process of working up a file. But the one thing I want to end with and ask you all about is for Kenney and Sams, I think the biggest sort of non-negotiable is having a good attitude. We want positive people that are at the firm. We have a rule when we're hiring of a sort of no jerk rule. We're not yellers. We are, Mike said, hard charging. We make no excuses for the quality that we expect of ourselves. Sometimes people like Brittany will send emails at 4:30 in the morning, and that's just something we have to learn to deal with. But what we don't do is disrespect one another, and I think we try to be respectful to the opposing lawyers and obviously to the client. But that attitude, can you speak to that, Brittany? How do you think that's the most important thing about being a successful, happy lawyer? And where do you sort of fall on the spectrum of attitude?
Yeah, I think in any job, right? You have to sort of choose to be happy some days. Everyone has stressors in their life and in their job, and you can really let it get to you and walk around like a total stress case all the time. And there are times when that's valid, and there are times when it's okay to sort of lean into the stress and lean into sort of the overwhelming feeling that you're sitting with, because you need to recognize when to ask for help. But then there are days where, you wake up, you open an email, a snippy email from opposing counsel, or a disappointed email from, a client who just doesn't really see the overarching theme of their case. And you just have to choose to roll off your back. And it's, the day's gonna be okay, and tomorrow's a new day. And there's so much going on within your own life and within the firm and within your colleagues' lives and within opposing counsel's lives and within your clients' lives that you don't control. You control your own happiness. And so, I think some of it is just waking up and choosing to do the best you can and be as positive as you can within reason. You also don't have to BS your way through the day. If you're having a really tough day, it's okay to sort of acknowledge that within yourself and also acknowledge that tomorrow's a new day.
Yeah, and you have to have those boundaries. There's sort of limits that everybody can place, but I do think if you can let less of it land personally, and if you can also have that sort of magic weapon of understanding that someone else is probably having a bad day, and generally people's bad behavior are the result of that, doesn't excuse it, but I think it's a helpful thing of sort of realizing I don't have to engage, I don't have to take the bait. Mike, how important is it for you in terms of the attitudinal approach when you walk in the doors and your attitude? And I think you've got you're thick-skinned, and I think you're hardworking. But you're someone that has really been vocal, and I give you a ton of credit for that, about pushing for well-being on behalf of yourself and on behalf of your peers, it's such a critical thing to have someone like you who walks the walk, Mike, but I think also has people's back and is making it part of what you're trying to accomplish as a leader. So what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think the practice of law, and especially the practice of civil litigation, is improved if everyone is professional. There aren't any pot shots. There aren't any personal attacks. And not to linger on the email issue, but I feel like email, the way that that's used in legal practice, professional work culture, that a lot of context is lacking, a lot of tonality is lacking in email. I know Brittany's a big proponent of picking up the phone, whether it's client, whether it's opposing counsel. People can be, whether intentionally or not, they can be the keyboard warriors, and then when you pick up the phone, have a conversation with them, everyone's
Absolutely.
guard is relaxed. It's easier to have a more productive conversation. And then one more thing is, how the firm promotes getting involved in industry groups, bar associations by meeting people, whether it's opposing counsel or someone else, that when you're on the other side of the V with them in a case, that if you hadn't met them through some event or some group, you would have no way of telling them from any, Mary or Paul on the street. But when you meet them, when you spend some time with them in a professional but still more social context, that you develop those personal bonds, and it makes the practice of law a lot easier if, oh, I know opposing counsel, they're a good person, it humanizes it. And so I appreciate the fact that getting involved in organizations like that, but also just being a decent human being, makes the practice of law, makes life, makes civil litigation more enriching and enjoyable experience.
Great feedback. Herling, you and I, we spend a fair amount of the time in any given day laughing about things and having a good time with work and with the cases that we're working on. What is it about your attitude you think allows you to do a difficult job and do it with, a high degree of competence, but with a positive energy that people in the office really appreciate and enjoy? What is it about you that you think makes it better for you to be able to withstand some of the difficulties of being a litigator?
Yeah, I mean, I think to end on a cliche, so much of life is about perspective. I think it's a hard job, it's a stressful job, but in many ways it's a cushy job, right? We have an office, we have windows, we have a roof over our heads. I've life has taken me through a bunch of different paths, and I've seen, working with Teach for America, my students' parents working 3 jobs a day, and the kids having to take care of their families. Even just my background and how I grew up, I think at the end of the day, I think I'm fortunate to be able to do the job that I have and to be able to have a voice. Part of the reason why I take my job so seriously is that it's a service industry for our clients, and in our day-to-day practice and the entirety of our job is to give clients the voice that they don't necessarily have. The legal industry is just inherently exclusive. It's designed that way. We write the way we write, not because it's better, but because we want an exclusive set of people to understand it. And so I think with all that in mind, it would just feel disingenuous to me to come to this job with a negative attitude and not really understand that I am one of the lucky people that get to do this job, and there are people that depend on me to do my job well, and I take that responsibility very seriously. But it doesn't mean I can't have fun doing it. So
Yeah, well, I appreciate that perspective that you bring, Herling, and the attitude, and keeping a sense of the bigger picture of what it is that we're doing. It's a hard job, but there are harder jobs. It's a really important job, but you have to be able to enjoy it and laugh and learn from mistakes. And you need mentors around you to support you, and you need to be able to carve out those boundaries so that you have time for yourself. And I think one of the things that I really speak passionately about to the 3 of you and others is the idea of shrinking your world. I think especially as a junior lawyer, when you come in, it's so overwhelming. You don't know anyone. You're not yet familiar with the other lawyers or the judges, and everything just seems big and scary. And Mike, you made the point. You can get out there and get engaged in bar organizations, whether it's young lawyers divisions or other groups. Find whether it's an affinity bar group, whatever works for you. So important that you get out there and find internal and external mentors, get to know other people, because the more that you put into and investing, and it really is an investment into shrinking your world, I think we've all found that it makes it a lot less intimidating and a lot more satisfying. And to be able to give of yourself and show the rest of the bar and the rest of the community that you have time to share with other people, that you bring something to the table, you get the benefit of service, which is a great part of it, but you also get in return those relationships that are going to come in handy as you get farther along in the practice of law. It's been great for me. It's a big part of why I came to the firm. I met Chris Kenney on a case, but then we started interacting with each other because he put me in an organization of lawyers where there was networking opportunities and continuing education. It was a huge part of my development it did result in bringing in more business, and that's been great. It's been very satisfying, especially when I have such great lawyers like you to help support my clients. But most importantly, it's the ability to build those relationships and to have people that know what it's like to practice law and to be litigators in the way that we're doing that. So I really appreciate all of your perspectives. You're three of the best lawyers that we have at the firm. For those of the listeners that want to learn more or connect with any of the lawyers on the podcast, Brittany, Mike, or Herling, you can find their bios on our website. That's www.kslegal.com. K is in Kenney, S is in Sams, the word legal.com. All three speak regularly for various bar groups, so you can find them online. And if you want to reach out and touch base with them about what's worked for them to be successful lawyers, I really urge you to do that, because I think so highly of the three people that you've heard from today, both as lawyers that get to work on the cases with me and I get to work with them, and just also as friends and colleagues at Kenney and Sams. So I think they're great resources. They've been fortunate to have some really good mentors, it sounds like, and I'm happy that they're doing that and finding that inside and outside of the firm. But I suspect they'd be people that would be worthwhile for you to reach out to if you are an associate that's looking for a path forward or trying to figure out some tips from such successful individuals like this. So thank you for our listeners. Thanks to the three of you for joining us. Really appreciate it, and we look forward to joining other guests in the future. Next up, we're going to be speaking with some mediators about alternative dispute resolution. In some of our past episodes, there's one on employment practice tips for employers in 2024, and also hearing from the founders of the firm, Chris Kenney and Mike Sams, about what they were doing when they founded the firm and the things that they've learned, lessons about running a successful firm of 23 lawyers. So thanks for joining us. Thanks to the three of you. I appreciate it, and look forward to the future episodes. Take care.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for listening to Trial Think. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us for all of our upcoming episodes.